The child's cry tore through the rusted alleys like the wail of something broken beyond repair. It was sharp, trembling, and carried the kind of pain no one should ever hear from a boy so small. "They broke my toy, and hit my mom," he sobbed, clutching the mangled plastic truck in his shaking hands. The world around him stood still for a breath. Even the wind that usually howled through the slums of Steel Point fell silent. A few meters away, under the shadow of a corrugated iron shed, a group of bikers froze mid-conversation. Wool-stained jackets, steel boots, heavy engines idling low. They looked like men carved from the smoke and grit of the place itself. Their leader, Rafe, turned slowly toward the voice. He wasn't the kind of man you'd call gentle, the jagged scar across his cheek said as much. But something in that cry hit him harder than any blade ever had. "Who hit your mom, kid?" Rafe's voice was gravel, controlled, but dangerous. The boy sniffled, pointing a trembling finger toward the road where 3 men in factory uniforms were laughing, tossing an empty soda can into the gutter. The factory logo, Harvard Steel Co., gleamed on their sleeves. "They took my truck. Said poor kids don't need toys." The boy stammered. "When Mama told them to stop, they..." His voice broke again. Behind Rafe, one of his men revved his engine. A deep, thunderous growl that rolled through the street. The sound made the factory men glance back, their smirks faltering for the first time. Rafe crouched down beside the boy. "What's your name?" "Imran." The boy whispered. "Imran." Rafe's tone softened, but his eyes burned. "Where's your mom now?" "She's in. She's lying inside. I think she's hurt bad." That was all it took. Rafe rose slowly, his leather gloves creaking. His men exchanged looks. They'd seen that face before. It was the look that came before storms. "Tank, diesel. With me," Rafe ordered. The bikers mounted their machines, the engines roaring like beasts awakened. As they turned toward the narrow lane leading to Imran's house, the smell of petrol and vengeance filled the air. Inside the dimly lit shack, Imran's mother lay on the floor, clutching her side. Blood darkened her dress. She looked up as Rafe entered, fear flickering in her eyes. "It's okay," he said gently, kneeling beside her. "We're not here to hurt you. I know who you are," she whispered weakly. "People say the steel serpents bring only trouble." Rafe's lips twitched. Sometimes trouble is exactly what's needed. He glanced around. A broken bed, a leaking roof, a single flickering bulb. The whole place looked like it was fighting to stand. He gently lifted the woman and laid her on the bed. "They came from the factory?" he asked. "Yes," she breathed. "They were drunk. Said my son should stay away from the main road. I told them he was just playing. Her voice trembled. "They called me names, shoved me down, and laughed." Rafe's jaw clenched. Harvard Steel again. He'd heard their name too many times. The factory that promised jobs but delivered chains. They owned everything in Steel Point. The land, the houses, even the law. The people worked like slaves for a wage barely enough to eat. And the ones who refused. They were crushed quietly, their stories buried under noise and metal. But not tonight. Outside, the bikers mated, their headlights cutting through the rising dusk. Imran stood at the doorway, clutching the broken toy. Rafe approached him and crouched again. This time with a strange gentleness that didn't belong to a man like him. "You still got the pieces?" Imran nodded, opening his small hand to reveal the snapped, off wheels and the truck's cracked body. Rafe took them carefully, staring at the toy as if it were something sacred. "We'll fix this, both of you." Then he rose, turning toward his crew. "They're at the factory gates," Tank said, his voice deep and low. Rafe's eyes flicked toward the distant glow of the steel plant. The sound of hammers and fire echoing through the night like a heartbeat. "Mount up," Rafe ordered. Engines ignited one by one, growling through the slum like a promise of retribution. Imran clutched his mother's hand as the roar grew louder. His eyes widened. A mix of fear and awe. "Where are they going?" his mother asked weakly. Rafe looked back once. "To make sure no one ever hits you again." And with that, the bikers tore down the alley, dust and smoke swirling in their wake. The sight of them, a line of roaring steel cutting through the night, sent shivers through the onlookers. At the edge of the slum, where the broken streets met the vast iron gates of Harvard Steel, the bikers slowed. The guards at the entrance stiffened. Rafe pulled up first, his eyes fixed on the glowing factory beyond the fence. A beast of metal and greed that had crushed too many lives already. The guard stepped forward nervously. "You can't be here, factory's closed." Rafe smiled coldly. "Good. Then nobody will miss what's about to happen. He revved his engine once, the echo bouncing off the steel walls. The other bikers followed, engines roaring in unison. Somewhere far behind them, Imran stood in the doorway of his shack, clutching his broken toy, listening to the thunder fade into the distance. He didn't know what those men would do. But something told him the night wouldn't end quietly. The factory loomed like a sleeping monster. A giant skeleton of rusted steel and smoke, its chimneys piercing the night sky. The roar of the motorcycles echoed off its walls, breaking the silence that usually followed the workers' departure. Rafe killed his engine first. One by one. The others followed, their headlights slicing through the haze. The guards at the gate exchanged uncertain looks, fingers twitching near their radios. "Stay calm," one muttered. "They're just showing off." But Rafe wasn't there to show off. He dismounted, boots crunching on gravel, and walked forward with a quiet, terrifying certainty. "I want the men who work under Harvard Steel's East Shift," he said, voice low but sharp. 3 of them. They wear blue jackets, badges reading Kellen, Royce, and Dev. You know them. The guards hesitated. "We don't give out names." Rafe tilted his head slightly, as though giving them one chance to make the right choice. "They hurt a woman and a child." "That's not our concern." "Wrong answer." Rafe took a step closer. Tank, a massive figure with arms like iron girders, revved his bike in warning. The guard swallowed hard, fumbling for his radio. But Diesel snatched it out of his hand before he could speak. "Try again," Diesel said quietly. The guards knew better than to fight. One of them pointed nervously toward the eastern warehouse. "They're in there. Probably drinking." Rafe nodded once, then turned to his crew. "Nobody touches the workers. Just the ones who laid hands on that woman." They moved like shadows, slipping past the gates and into the factory yard. The air smelled of burnt metal and motor oil. Sparks flickered from a half-closed window, and inside, drunken laughter echoed. Rafe pushed open the door. The 3 men sat around a crate, bottles clinking. Their laughter slicing through the smoke-filled air. Kellen, the tallest, was bragging about something. Waving a wrench like a trophy. And the kid started crying. "Man, you should have seen his face," he roared. The others burst into laughter, slapping the table. Then the laughter died. They turned toward the doorway. And froze. The bikers filled it completely. Black leather, cold eyes, and engines rumbling faintly outside like thunder waiting to strike. Kellen blinked, setting down his bottle. "What the hell is this?" Rafe stepped forward, his voice steady. "You hit a woman and broke a child's toy. That woman's name is Layla, her son is Imran," Royce snorted. "So what? You planning to cry for them?" Rafe's eyes didn't blink. "No. I came to make you understand what that feels like." Before Royce could react, Rafe moved. Faster than anyone expected. His fist slammed into Royce's chest, sending him crashing against the crates. Bottles shattered. Diesel kicked another man's chair, sending it spinning. Kellen lunged for his wrench, but Tank grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the wall so hard the plaster cracked. "You think it's funny to scare a kid?" Tank growled, his voice deep and guttural. We didn't mean." Kellen sputtered, but Tank's glare cut him off. Rafe grabbed the broken toy truck from his pocket and held it up. "This belonged to a boy who'll never forget your faces. You took something from him that wasn't worth a dime. But it meant the world to him." Kellen's lip blawed. "We were just drunk. Then consider this your hangover," Rafe said, and punched him square across the jaw. The man fell, groaning. Diesel stepped forward, but Rafe raised a hand. "Enough. Leave them," he said. "They'll remember this more than bruises ever could." He dropped the toy on the floor beside Kellen's trembling hand. "Fix it. And when it's done, take it back to the boy. You'll knock on his door, you'll hand it to him, and you'll apologize to his mother." Loud enough for the whole street to hear. Royce spat blood. "You think we'll just..." Rafe leaned closer, voice so low it cut like a blade. "If you don't, every biker in this city will know your names. You'll never walk home in peace again." The men stared at him, fear spreading like fire through their eyes. Rafe turned to leave, his boots echoing against the steel floor. The bikers followed silently. Outside, the night air felt colder. Diesel exhaled, glancing back at the warehouse. "You think they'll do it?" "They will," Rafe said. "Fear's a better teacher than fists." But deep down, he knew this wasn't over. The men they'd just humiliated weren't the kind to stay quiet. Harvard Steel had a way of protecting its own. Especially when their pride was on the line. As they rode back toward the slums, the city lights shimmered through the haze. The engines roared again, echoing through the metal canyons of Steel Point. When they reached Imran's alley, the boy was still awake, sitting beside his mother. She had managed to sit up, holding a cloth to her side. Rafe parked his bike and approached. "How's the pain?" She managed a faint smile. "Less than before." He nodded. "Good." Imran looked up at him with wide eyes. "Did you get my toy back?" Rafe knelt beside him. "Not yet. But they're fixing it. And they're going to say sorry." The boy blinked. "They will. Trust me," Rafe said softly. "They'll never forget you." A small smile tugged at Imran's lips. The first that night. As the bikers rode away again, Tank leaned toward Rafe. "You really think they'll keep quiet? Factory men talk, bosses listen." Rafe didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the horizon where the glow of Harvard steel still burned against the sky. "Let them talk," he murmured. Maybe it's time someone finally heard. By morning, Steel Point was buzzing with whispers. Rumors moved faster than smoke through the narrow lanes. Stories about how the steel serpents had stormed the factory, how 3 foremen were left bruised and silent, and how Rafe, the man with the scar, had made them kneel. Lila heard it first from her neighbor, a frail woman who sold bread by the corner. "They say the bikers made those men fix your boy's toy," she said, eyes wide with both fear and admiration. "No one ever stands up to the factory. Not like that." Lila sat quietly, still weak, her son curled beside her. "They shouldn't have risked their lives for us," she murmured. But deep down, she knew. Sometimes, justice didn't wait for permission. Later that afternoon, a small shadow appeared at the edge of the alley. Imran looked up from his toy pieces and froze. The same 3 men stood there, bruised and hesitant, one of them clutching something wrapped in brown paper. Layla tensed, but Rafe's words echoed in her mind. "They'll fix it. They'll say sorry." Kellen stepped forward, his swollen lip trembling. "Mom, we came to apologize." He unwrapped the paper carefully. Inside was a small, shiny red truck, new paint, fixed wheels, and a faint mark where it had once cracked. Imran gasped. "You fixed it?" Kellen knelt, holding it out with shaking hands. "I'm sorry, kid. For breaking it. For everything." The other 2 mumbled their apologies, heads bowed. Layla stared at them, at the strange, raw shame in their faces, and slowly nodded. "You've done right by coming." As they turned to leave, Layla's voice stopped them. "Tell your bosses," she said softly, "that not everyone in Steel Point will stay quiet anymore." The men didn't reply, but the message settled heavy in their hearts as they walked away. That night, the sound of engines returned. Not in anger this time, but in camaraderie. The bikers gathered near the river, where the flickering lights of the city reflected off the dark water. Rafe sat apart from them, staring at the skyline, the smokestacks of Harvard steel stabbing into the clouds. Diesel tossed a can toward him. "You did good, boss. The people are talking." "Talking isn't enough," Rafe said quietly. "Not while Harvard keeps squeezing the life out of them." Tank leaned back on his bike. "You planning to start a war?" Rafe didn't answer at first. He looked at the grease under his nails, the scars on his hands. The kind of marks that never washed away. "Maybe I'm just tired of seeing the same people bleed while others count their money." Diesel smirked. "That's not new." "No," Rafe said. But this time, people saw something different. A line they didn't think anyone would cross. As they spoke, headlights appeared in the distance. A black SUV rolled toward them, stopping just short of the bikes. The window slid down, and a man in a pressed suit leaned out. "Raf," he said smoothly. "The boss wants a word." Rafe's jaw tightened. "Which boss, Mr. Harvard himself?" The bikers exchanged glances. Harvard, the man behind the empire, the one whose name they spat like a curse. Rafe stepped closer. "Tell him if he wants a word, he can come down to Steel Point." The man chuckled. "That's not how it works. You come to him, or he comes for you." Rafe stared him down. "Then let him come." The SUV's tires spun gravel as it pulled away, the threat hanging heavy in the air. Diesel whistled low. "You know he's not bluffing." Rafe's eyes followed the receding taillights. "Good, I'm done with men who hide behind gates." By morning, Steel Point was crawling with factory guards. They roamed the streets in pairs, their batons tapping against metal walls. Flyers went up at every corner. Harvard Steel warns against unlawful interference. Vigilantes will be prosecuted. People turned their faces away when the guards passed, afraid to even whisper the bikers' names. But when they saw Rafe's crew riding through, the fear flickered into something else. Quiet respect, maybe even hope. Layla watched from her doorway, holding Imran close. The boy waved as the bikes thundered by. For the first time, she saw pride in his eyes. That night, a fire broke out near the old factory warehouse. By the time the engines arrived, half the building was in flames. Nobody knew who started it, or at least, nobody said. Rumors blamed the serpents. Others whispered it was Harver himself, burning evidence. The truth was more complicated. Inside his office tower, Mr. Harver stood by the window, watching the smoke rise in the distance. His reflection shimmered against the glass. Expensive suit, silver hair, eyes as cold as his steel. "Find him," he said to the man beside him. "Find Rafe. I don't care how." The man nodded. "And when we do?" Harver turned, his smile thin and sharp. "Remind him what happens when someone dents my empire." Far across the city, Rafe stared at the same column of smoke from his garage, the engines silent around him. He knew the message. A warning. But he also knew something had already shifted. People in Steel Point had begun to talk, to hope. The silence that had kept them prisoners was cracking. And once silence breaks, it never quite returns. Rafe lit a cigarette, the ember glowing in the dim light. He thought of Layla's quiet strength, of Imran's broken toy now whole again, and of the look in those factory men's eyes when they realized fear wasn't one-sided anymore. Tank entered quietly. "Word is Harver's." Rafe exhaled smoke. "Good," he said simply. Tank frowned. "Good. You do realize what that means, right? Harver doesn't send invitations. He sends coffins." Rafe stubbed the cigarette against a steel post, sparks fading in the dim light. He's scared. Men like Harver only reach for the stick when the whisper of rebellion starts sounding like thunder. Diesel leaned against his bike, arms crossed. "So what's the plan, boss? You gonna just wait for him to make the first move?" "No," Rafe said, grabbing his jacket. "We make it for him." By nightfall, the steel serpents rode again. Not through the narrow alleys this time, but down the main industrial road leading toward the steel district. The city's glow shimmered on their visors. They weren't looking for a fight. They were looking for proof. Rumor had it Harver Steel had been running a secret night shift. Illegal laborers, no pay, no names. And if Rafe could find evidence of that, it wouldn't just be revenge anymore. It would be justice. The gates to the abandoned East plant were chained, but that never stopped them. Diesel broke the lock with a single strike of his crowbar. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of burnt oil and despair. Rafe switched on his flashlight. What the beam revealed made even him pause. Rows of workers. Thin, gaunt, their hands raw. Hunched over conveyor belts that never stopped. The clatter of machines drowned out everything, and their eyes were hollow, mechanical. Children worked among them. Rafe froze. He watched a boy no older than Imran lift heavy steel rods, his arms trembling under the weight. Each time he faltered, a supervisor barked and raised his stick. Tank's hand curled into a fist. "They're using kids, Rafe." Rafe's jaw tightened. "Take photos. All of it." Diesel pulled out a camera, snapping quickly while Rafe walked toward the line. The supervisor turned, startled, his face pale. "What the? Who are you?" Rafe didn't answer. He grabbed the man by his collar and shoved him against the wall. "You run this." I just follow orders," the man stammered. Rafe's voice was low, deadly calm. "Whose orders?" "Harver's," he said. "Keep the belts moving." Tank's punch landed before the man could finish. The noise drew attention. Workers began to stop, watching in silence. Their faces showed disbelief, fear, and something faintly alive beneath it, hope. "Go home," Rafe told them, his voice echoing across the hall. "Now. You're done for the night. You're done for good." A woman hesitated. "They'll punish us. Not if they can't find you." Diesel interrupted. "Go." The workers fled, scattering like frightened birds into the night. Some cried. Some just ran. When the factory floor finally fell silent, Rafe looked up at the company logo painted high on the wall. Harver Steel Co. And felt a wave of fury rise inside him. "You want to own this city, Harvard," he muttered. "Then you'll burn with it." He turned to his crew. "Torch it." Diesel hesitated. "You sure, boss? This ain't just revenge anymore. This is war." And Rafe's eyes blazed. "Then let it start here." Flames caught fast. Within minutes, the old machinery began to groan under the heat. Sparks lipped toward the rafters, painting the walls orange. They left before the sirens came, riding into the dark while the East plant burned behind them. A beacon of defiance against the choking sky. By dawn, News had spread across the city. Harvard's East Wing destroyed in a mysterious fire. No casualties, but heavy losses. Harvard watched the footage on his office screen, jaw clenched so tight it looked like stone. Find him, he told his security chief. I want him brought in alive. I want to look him in the eye when I break him. That same morning, Lila woke to the distant sound of helicopters circling the steel district. She held Imran close, unease coiling in her chest. She knew the fire had something to do with Rafe, and feared what might come next. Imran looked up at her. Mama, the bikers helped us. They're the good guys, right? Lila hesitated. Sometimes. Good men do dangerous things to make bad ones stop. Across town, the serpents regrouped in their garage, tension thick in the air. The younger members were restless, fired up by what they'd done. We showed them, one shouted. No one will ever touch us again. Rafe silenced him with a look. This isn't about us. It's about everyone who's been stepped on and silenced. Don't turn it into pride. The tank nodded grimly. But Harvard's not going to take this lying down. You know that, right? I'm counting on it, Rafe said. Later that night, as Rafe walked the quiet streets alone, he passed the small house where Lila lived. Through the window, he saw Imran playing with his red truck again, its wheels shining under the dim bulb. For a fleeting moment, a softness returned to his eyes. Then headlights swept across the street. A black SUV slowed, its window rolling down just long enough for Rafe to see the muzzle of a gun glint in the dark. The shot shattered the night. Rafe dove behind a wall as bullets tore through the quiet street. Glass exploded, and Imran's toy truck fell from his hand as his mother screamed. The SUV sped off, tires screeching. Rafe staggered to his feet, blood running from a graze on his arm. He rushed to the door, heart pounding. Layla was trembling, shielding her son. They were shooting. I know, Rafe said, breathing hard. They've started their war. He looked down at Imran. The boy's toy lay broken again, one wheel missing, a trail of blood beside it where the shards had cut Rafe's hand. He clenched his fist. No more warnings. Outside, the engines of the serpents began to awaken once more, their roars echoing through the narrow streets like thunder rolling before a storm. The night swallowed Steel Point whole. Sirens wailed in the distance, and the city trembled beneath the hum of fear and vengeance. Rafe's wound burned. But it wasn't the pain that kept him awake. It was the sight of that shattered toy, lying once again in Imran's small, trembling hands. It felt like the world itself was mocking him. Everything he'd tried to protect had been dragged back into the dirt. In the serpent's garage, the air was heavy with the smell of oil and anger. The crew gathered around Rafe, waiting for his word. Diesel slammed his fist against the workbench. They shot at a house with a kid in it. Rafe! That's not business anymore. That's personal. Tank's eyes were dark. Harvard's not hiding behind his suits now. He's sending killers. Rafe looked at them. His brothers, forged not by blood, but by shared scars. We burn one factory, and he answers with bullets. That's who he is. He doesn't care about lives. He only understands control. Then we take it from him. Diesel growled. Rafe stood, his shadow stretching long across the concrete floor. No, we take his truth. The people of this city worship his empire, because they don't know what it costs. We show them. He picked up the camera Diesel had used earlier. The one filled with pictures of children working under the factory lights. Their faces, hollow and exhausted, stared back from the small screen. These, Rafe said, his voice low but steady, will speak louder than flames. A tank nodded slowly. So what's the plan? Rafe's eyes hardened. We're breaking into the main plant. Harvard's headquarters. We'll broadcast the footage on his own screens. Every billboard, every monitor, every ad that sells his lies. The men exchanged uneasy glances. Breaking into Harvard Steel's headquarters wasn't just risky, it was suicide. Diesel exhaled. You really think this will end him? No. Rafe said, sliding his gloves on. But it might free the rest of them. As they prepared, Lila appeared at the door, her shawl pulled tightly around her shoulders. Her face was pale, but her eyes fierce. You can't keep doing this, she said. They'll kill you. Rafe turned to her. If I stop, they'll keep killing others. You saw what they did. They shot at your home, at your boy. Her voice broke. And what happens when they come again? What happens when they don't miss? Rafe hesitated. For a brief moment, beneath the armor and the fury, there was a trace of something else. Guilt, maybe even tenderness. He stepped closer. Lila, I've spent my whole life fighting ghosts. Men like Harver are the reason this city looks the way it does. I can't stand by any more." She looked up at him, tears glinting in the low light. "Then promise me one thing," she whispered. "Whatever you do, don't make Imran lose another person he looks up to." But Rafe didn't answer. But when he turned to leave, there was a quiet understanding between them. That some fights were worth everything, even if they cost everything. By midnight, the serpents were on the move. The city's main factory compound stretched wide beneath the glow of security lights, guarded by patrols with rifles and dogs. But the serpents had planned every detail. They rode in two groups. One to draw the guards away, the other to breach the control center. Engines whispered as they approached the fences. Diesel cut the power grid with a single arc of his pliers. The lights flickered. Then darkness swallowed the compound whole. "Go," Rafe ordered. They slipped through the shadows like smoke. The whine of machinery echoed through the halls as they moved deeper in. Every sound, every metallic clang, felt like the pulse of a dying beast. When they reached the main control room, Rafe connected the camera to the central feed. The screens blinked, then one by one, came alive with the images from the East plant. The children, the beaten workers, the truth behind Harver's empire. "Broadcasting now," Diesel muttered. Across Steel Point, the billboards that once screamed Harver's slogans flickered. In the crowded streets, people stopped and stared as the images played. Faces they recognized, suffering they'd ignored. The city froze. Harver's world cracked in real time. Inside his office, miles away, Harver's assistant burst through the door. "Sir, the screens. Every public feed. They've been hijacked." Harver turned toward the wall of monitors, his reflection distorted by the images flashing across them. His empire's mask was gone, stripped bare. "Shut it down," he snapped. "We can't." Rafe's voice echoed through the speakers. "You built your kingdom on the backs of the forgotten. Tonight, they see you for what you are." Harver's face twisted in rage. "Find him," he roared. Back at the plant, alarms blared. Guards poured in from every corridor. Bullets shattered glass, ricocheting off steel beams. "Raf, we've got company!" Diesel shouted. Tank fired a warning shot, covering their retreat. The serpents scattered, engines roaring to life. But Rafe stayed for one last second, watching the footage loop on every screen. The proof, undeniable and raw. Then he turned and ran. As they burst through the outer gates, spotlights lit up the compound. The roar of engines collided with the sharp crack of gunfire. The night became chaos, fire, smoke, and screams merging into a single violent symphony. One bullet grazed Diesel's shoulder. Tank's bike swerved, sparks flying as a tire burst. "Go!" Rafe yelled. "Don't stop." They tore through the main road, the city rising before them like a battlefield. Behind them, the factory's alarms wailed like a dying animal. And above, every screen still burned with truth. People began stepping out of their homes watching. Some cheered. Some wept. The silence that had ruled Steel Point for decades had finally shattered. But Rafe knew Harver wouldn't let it end like this. He felt it in his bones. The storm had only just begun. The streets of Steel Point glowed with the flicker of rebellion. The people had seen everything. The hidden slaves, the children, the lies. And they would never unsee it again. But even as hope ignited in the hearts of the forgotten, vengeance was already roaring down the highway. A convoy of black SUVs thundered through the industrial road, engines snarling, headlights slicing through the night. Inside the lead vehicle, Mr. Harver sat in silence, his hands clenched on his cane, his jaw rigid. "Block every exit," he ordered coldly. "No survivors." In the distance, the sound of motorcycles rose again. Wild, untamed, defiant. Rafe led the serpents down the main road, smoke curling behind them. Diesel was bleeding from his arm but refused to slow. Tank's bike limped on one bad wheel. Every man knew what this meant. The point of no return. "Harver's coming," Diesel yelled over the engines. Rafe's reply was calm, steady. "Then we meet him halfway." They skidded to a stop near the abandoned overpass overlooking the city. The skyline burned with orange light. Not from fires, but from the thousands of screens still playing the footage. Rafe dismounted, looking out at the glowing chaos below. "We started something tonight," he said softly. "Something that can't be stopped now." A tank wiped the sweat and soot from his face. "You think the people will stand up?" Rafe's eyes narrowed. "They already have. Harver just doesn't know it yet." Then, the roar of engines grew louder. The SUVs appeared at the far end of the road, lights glaring like angry eyes. Harver stepped out first, flanked by armed guards. His expensive shoes crunched on broken glass, his cane tapping against the pavement. "Rafe," he called out, his voice echoing. "You've made quite a mess." Rafe stood tall, the night wind whipping through his hair. "You built it, Harver. I just showed them what it really looks like." Harver smiled thinly. "Do you think they'll thank you for this? You've exposed them to chaos, to hunger, to fear. The poor need order, even if it means suffering. You gave them false hope." Rafe stepped forward, his voice firm. "Hope isn't false, Harver. It's just something you've never sold." The guards raised their rifles. The serpents revved their engines in unison, a chorus of defiance. And for a long suspended second, time stopped. The world balanced on a breath between peace and violence. Then everything exploded. Gunfire erupted, echoing through the empty overpass. Sparks flew as bullets struck metal. Diesel ducked behind a pillar, firing back with his pistol. Tank used his bike as cover, yelling for the others to fall back. Rafe moved like a shadow, drawing fire away from his men. He ducked behind a rusted car, reloading, his breath harsh. Harver stayed back, watching with cold detachment, as though observing a chess match he already believed he'd won. But then, something shifted. From the streets below came the roar of more engines. Dozens, no hundreds, of motorcycles flooded the road, their headlights forming a river of light. The people of Steel Point had come. Workers, outcasts, and wanderers. All those who'd lived in silence under Harver's shadow were riding toward the overpass. They carried tools, pipes, anything that could strike. Harver's eyes widened. "What?" Rafe smiled faintly. "You wanted control. Here's what freedom looks like." The mob surged forward. The guards panicked. Bullets met the roar of engines, and chaos became revolution. Rafe fought his way through the fray, eyes locked on Harver. The old man stumbled back as the crowd pressed closer. "This city doesn't belong to you anymore," Rafe said, stepping forward, his voice low but cutting. Harver sneered. "You think you can erase me? You think this will last?" Rafe leaned in, his scar catching the light. "No empire lasts forever." He turned away as Harver's own guards fled, leaving their master to the wrath of the people. The noise swallowed everything. Shouting, engines, fire. And then, slowly, it began to fade. By dawn, Steel Point was unrecognizable. Smoke drifted over the rooftops, mingling with the golden light of sunrise. The factory gates were open, its walls covered in graffiti. Words of defiance, hope, and memory. Layla stood with Imran at the doorway of their home, watching the first quiet morning in years. The boy clutched his red truck. Its wheels still shining. "Did they win, Mama?" he asked softly. Layla looked out at the horizon, where the distant sound of motorcycles still echoed faintly. "Not as a threat, but as a promise. They didn't fight to win, my love. They fought so no one would have to be afraid again." Rafe stood on the ridge above the city, his jacket torn, face bruised, the sun catching the streaks of soot across his skin. The serpents gathered around him silently, battered but alive. The city below was stirring. Workers flooding the streets, families emerging from their homes, voices rising in unity. The silence that had once defined Steel Point was gone forever. Tank limped over, handing Rafe a cigarette. "So what now, boss? We rebuild?" Rafe stared at the sunrise for a long moment before answering. "No, we ride." Diesel smirked faintly. "And where to this time?" Rafe slipped the broken toy wheel, the one from Imran's truck, into his pocket. "Wherever someone still thinks they can hit the helpless and walk away." He mounted his bike, engine rumbling to life. The others followed, a chorus of defiance rolling over the quiet streets. As they rode away, Lila and Imran watched from their doorway. The boy raised his toy truck high, its cracked paint gleaming in the dawn. The engines faded into the distance, leaving only the echo, a low, steady thunder that seemed to say, "Some battles don't end."